Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and there's still more to unpack from the local and mayoral elections last week. The Tories have now suffered the worst local election results of any government since the early days of Thatcher. But one of the big questions regarding the results yesterday in particular is how did both the news media and the Conservative Party get their expectation management so wrong? In particular, how did a rumour take hold that Susan Hall would run Sadiq Khan close and maybe even win? Early on Friday morning, rumours were circulating that an upset was coming in London. The contest looked a lot closer than polls suggested, and Hall could actually produce a shock win. That was the rumour. It was impossible for such a rumour to be based on fact. The count for the London contest was not due to begin until 9 a.m. on Saturday morning, 24 hours later. The reason for this is because the authorities wanted to prioritise counting Westminster election votes if Sunak called the general election for the same date. There were suggestions that the turnout was lower in parts of London where Khan was stronger and higher in other areas, but even that wouldn't have been completely clear at the time. And the thing is, no basis for deciding there is evidence that Hall might run a close contest. Put it this way, not a single numerate analyst thought there was any reason to give any credibility to the rumour at all. The rumour was made up. So what was the purpose? Some suggested it was a Trumpian ploy in order to attack postal voting when the results came out. And sure enough, some of the usual suspects immediately seized on the fact that Khan did really well with the postal votes. Oh, what a shock, he did really well with the postal votes. It's like, yeah, he also did really well with the non-postal votes as well. That's why he won by such a large margin. In fact, Khan won by the biggest margin of any London re-election campaign and the biggest margin he had personally ever won by. And this was his third win. So it seemed the people, suspecting this form of foul play were justified. Oh, it was all just a plot to attack postal voting. However, the rumours were really widespread. Lots of journalists were in on it and Conservative Party activists and officials as well. It was being believed. It wasn't realistic that all of these people could have been in on the con because a lot of them would suffer when the results came out. As a result of this, a lot of journalists are now looking decidedly incompetent or worse still, corrupt. Laura Krunsberg said it was clear that the race is much closer than some polls suggest. She said this on Friday evening. So long after the rumours were started, but still 11 hours before the first vote had been officially counted. So how could she say it was clear? She wasn't reporting the fact that there were these rumours. She said it was clear. So she was satisfied it was fact. How could she be so clear herself unless she had broken electoral law by being allowed to examine samples of votes early or being in contact with someone who had? It was all looking decidedly dodgy. But we remember Hanlon's razor, never ascribe to malice that which may be explained by incompetence. And once the results had come out and Khan had won handsomely, indeed by a bigger margin than either of his two previous wins, a more plausible narrative started to come out, but one which still demands questions be asked of the news media at least. So some fairly junior party activists, Tory party activists, had gotten excited about something, we're told. It's hard to say what, but they took some spurious signs to be an indication that the contest was close. Now, activists by their nature are really invested in their campaign, and it's much easier for them to take a sign as, a sign that they're going to do well. Because, of course, they want to succeed, so they will desperately look for any evidence that their hard work is paying off. But they're not necessarily experts, and they're certainly not objective. So basically, some naive but maybe well-meaning activists thought there was reason to suppose Hall had done better than expected. What happened then was that more experienced journalists, who should have known better, heard of this and powered the rumours through their large platforms, presumably for clicks. They started to take hold as Friday morning progressed, and by the evening, before even a single vote had been counted, and against all the polling, people in the media and the Conservative Party were believing it. There were some who didn't, I must point out, such as Adam Bienkov of Byline Times, but the rumour took hold. And I must go back to a point I made earlier. It was not possible for a numerate analyst to believe this rumour. I dismissed it immediately, as did far more accomplished and independent experts than myself. We weren't saying that Khan was absolutely going to beat the result. We didn't know that. We were just saying that there's not a single data point which points to a close contest, much less a confluence of them. What happened here is a combination of the major players in our mainstream news media, as well as the top of the Conservative Party, because they should have scotched this rumour, it did them no good at all, being uneducated oafs. I have often remarked that I am something of an oddity. I'm a political commentator with a scientific background. It is way more common for political beasts to have a background in history, which is very understandable. History essentially is politics. It's impossible to understand one without the other. But although it's not uncommon for, say, mathematicians to be interested in history and read books on the subject as a hobby, it is vanishingly rare for historians to be interested in maths and read books on advanced statistics on the side. The same applies to many with a background in humanities. The end result is that instead of the national punditry having a mixed background where they can get together and pool their various areas of expertise, you know, because what would be brilliant on shows like this, if you had a historian and you had a political scientist and you had a statistician, and, you know, and you could get these people together and they could all pool their expertise and come up with vaguely sensible things to say. But no, that's not the case. Almost all of the pundits come from the same background. So there's a noticeable vacuum of statistical understanding amongst the commentariat and even political advisors, clearly. This is a serious failing which should be addressed. As the bad takes came out during Friday, I said in a WhatsApp group, news programmes, you know, when they're discussing election results, should really have their programmes hosted by a mathematician. They could still get on pundits with other backgrounds, obviously. But when you're discussing emerging election results, you're in the realm of statistics and you should have an expert steering the ship. The number of times someone said something which someone from a mathematical background would have seized on immediately was intensely irritating. And it's not like these outlets can't find such people. They choose not to. Because statistics is a funny discipline. You know, you ask the average person what they think about maths, even the average like political pundit, what do you think about maths? And they will happily tell you they're not really keen on maths and they're not very good at it. People are quite happy to admit that. And yet, the same average person seems to, if you present them with statistics, they think they can analyse it. They think they understand it. And statistics is a way more complex branch of mathematics than some of the ones this average person professes ignorance in. I see it all the time. For someone with my background, it doesn't just come across as wrong, but actually stupid. The other bad take was trying to somehow suggest that the breakdown of voting, if replicated in the general election, would result in a hung parliament. Now, of course, there were some bad faith actors, knowing liars who have got their own agenda to push, who seized on this. But again, many in the media were presenting this as if it was valid analysis. It's a nonsense for two main reasons. First, the local elections only covered a small part of the UK. We have local elections in different parts of the country each year on a roughly 4-year cycle, so it's never possible to map local election results onto national voting intentions. Second, people have more of a realistic choice in local elections. People know that an independent can have a good chance of winning. Indeed, if you lump independents together, they actually finish fourth in these local elections, ahead of even the Green Party. And the Greens and Lib Dems themselves can always do way better in local elections than the national parliamentary elections. Most people vote pragmatically for what they think is a realistic option for government, right? So the entire mindset is different for general elections. And anyone with any appreciation for maths understands this. In fact, this one is easy enough for even non-mathematicians to understand. Then you had the really bad take. So Labour had a 9-point lead in these local elections, but a 16-point lead in the local elections just before the 1997 general election. Needless to say, this came from someone without any mathematical training, another historian, which I'm not knocking, but as I said, not many historians have their nose in a book of stratified sampling of an evening. There are three major problems with this pointless analysis. First of all, local elections only sample a small part of the country. I've already discussed that. We have local elections, different parts of the country every single year, right? So, and different parts of the country vote differently. There's never a national picture emerges from any of them. Second, people do not vote the same way in local elections. It's not just that the issues are different. There's more choice, like I've already again said. Independent candidates can and do win in large numbers in local elections. Hardly ever in Westminster elections. Like every now and then an independent does win. Very rare. So in fact, as I say, you group independents together and they were actually the fourth largest party. I mean, I know they're not one party, but if you lumped them together, there were more independent councillors voted this week than Green Party councillors. And speaking of the likes of the Green Party, like back in the mid-90s, there were basically three. You could treat it as if there were three parties, because 97% of all votes were intended for the Conservatives, Labour, or the Lib Dems. There was a Green Party. It's not quite the same one as exists now, but it sort of did exist. But the likes of UKIP or Reform UK were still a glint in Nigel Farage's eye. There were a couple of small emerging anti-EU parties. That was it. These days, the number voting for the traditional big three has dwindled from about 97% to about 75%, driven in no small part by the emergence of these smaller parties, possibly partly because of the possibilities of digital campaigning, I don't know. But whatever the reason, votes are now spread across way more parties than that used to be the case. Finally, no correlation between local election results and general election results. And we know the reason for this is because very different voters take part. There are more people vote in general elections, but not local elections, than vote in both. So the majority of people voting in a general election have not voted in the local election. So of course, you can't possibly read anything into the local election results as to how they're going to vote. And there's a difference as well. The ones who only vote in general elections have a different mindset. The reason that they vote in general elections but not local elections is because they're only interested in influencing the government. Their focus is entirely on the national government. They're not interested in politics outside of that. So they're not interested in the local council or police and crime commissioner or even elected mayor, right? These people naturally gravitate not even to the traditional top three, the top two who can actually form the government, Labour or Conservative. So yeah, bad takes have been immense. Some of it has been driven by people who are deliberately aiming to deceive in order to further their own agenda. But the majority are genuinely taken in. They don't think they're lying. They just don't understand statistical analysis, but they think they do. They've got no background in it, no training, have never taken to learning as a side interest even. And yet they think they can look at data and analyse it. A willful ignorance of mathematics, which is so pervasive in political punditry in this country, and they don't even seem aware of it. I doubt, the media got caught out badly yesterday. Badly, they look ridiculous today. And yet, I don't think they'll even realise they've got a problem. And when the general election results come out, the bad takes trying to link these results with those will also not make those who got it badly wrong sit up and take note either. No, the very next day, they'll be writing their articles saying how the results show how they were right all along. The willful mathematical ignorance does my head in almost as much as the willful corruption in politics. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.